All right, welcome back to class. Everybody have a good week? Did you enjoy our teacher last week, Brother R? Yeah, he's a really good friend. He left this morning, by the way. He left at 6 a.m. this morning with his family back to the Muslim land to minister there. All right, let's open with a word of prayer. Lord, as we enter your presence this evening, as we consider your calling on our life, as we consider the things that you are walking us through, Lord, we ask for sensitivity. We ask for clarity. We ask for the ability to truly just hold you by the hand and have you lead us into different places at different seasons and different ways for each of us. Lord, we desire to be totally in tune with you, in tune with your Spirit, to be like Jesus, and to give all for your glory, Father. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, so this is missions level 3, preparing to go, and we want to review just a few things about the class. Many of you, I think most of you, have taken level 1 and level 2. Level 1 was what we called the big picture, to see the grand scheme of what needs to be done on the earth today. And so we heard from people from all walks of life and different ministries. Level 2 is pretty much culture, understanding how we think, how others think, how the Bible was written, and how God's Word applies to all cultures at all times, and how we can become more sensitive and begin to flow with what the Lord has. And so now in level 3, we want to look at what we're calling preparing to go. This is a class where we say, Lord, we feel a significant call. Now, it might not be completely clear at the moment of when and where and how, but something's burning. Something is moving. Something is drawing us to be used by God in a long-term way. And so that's what this class is designed to do, to prepare us to go out long-term. We hope to answer most questions that people have in going long-term. But in something that's as large as the rest of your life, there's no way we're actually going to answer all of those questions. But we will, in this class, hopefully have guest speakers and others that you can talk to. Of course, you can communicate with me anytime, but others that we can draw from and ask questions. And if I don't have an answer or our guest speaker doesn't have an answer, there's a good chance they know somebody that will. Because missions as a whole is so massive, and there's such a broad spectrum of places and callings, that somebody is going to be doing what you feel that you're called to do, and to connect with those people is crucial. As we said in our motto, knowing is half the battle. So that's what we would like to do, is to go through those things. This class is designed not only for missionaries, but also for missions pastors, missions leaders, missions coordinators. Because when we all, in a sense, march to the same beat, and we're all walking with the Lord in the same way, then we understand each other. And one of the problems of being a missions pastor, I was a missions pastor for years, is most missions pastors don't know what it's like to live overseas. I had the privilege of being overseas on a multiple short terms, and then living in a hut in a refugee camp and those kinds of things for 4 years before I became a missions pastor. But most missions pastors, when they meet, especially in Calvary Chapel, because we're so young as a movement, they've never done anything more than short term. So they become totally confused. Why isn't my missionary producing fruit? Man, we went over there and within a week, we did all these great things on a short-term trip. They've been living there for 3 months and they could barely survive. What's happening? This class is to merge the sending with those that go, and having us all be on the same page. So even if you're not called to move overseas, I'll bet you this, you're called to be involved in missions in some way significant. And so this class will work for both those that go and those that send. We want to hear from veteran missionaries. We're going to hear from missions pastors. We're going to hear from new missionaries. And this class is a two-way conversation. So at any point in time, as you feel myself or a guest speaker start to pause or change subjects, just raise your hand and let's dialogue. This is for an open dialogue forum. We did a little bit of that last week, but I'm going to continue to encourage you. And there's no wrong question, or there's no question that somebody will say, well, that's foolish. Everybody should know that. You're walking into a world that's so unknown that most people have no idea what they're getting into or what they're sending their people into. And so when you have questions like, I'm totally lost, what are you actually talking about? That's totally normal. Okay, so be encouraged. Feel like everything is on the right track when you feel completely lost. that is totally 100% normal. All right, let's just review our class motto. Knowing is half the battle. And we've talked about that. And we know that there are going to be situations that we're going to get into that if we know that the situations are coming, even if we don't understand what it's going to look like, feel like, or what our response is going to be to it, just knowing that we're not crazy is half of the battle. When you're out there and you're totally confused and you pick up a missionary biography and you read about other missionaries that were totally confused, you're like, okay, I'm not the only one. I'm not, and I'll use a Californian term, I'm not a loser. I'm normal. And most people have no idea what this is. So knowing is half the battle. In this class, we're going to cover God's call and God's timing. And I'm reviewing the entire semester, not just today. God's call and God's timing. We're going to talk about communicating the vision, which is something that most missionaries do not do well. As you read this week in the very beginning pages of our reading for the week, the author had said a lot of missionaries just say, I'm called, and then that's all they say. Missionaries are known to be bad communicators, which is kind of an oxymoron, isn't it? Like an ambassador can't explain what he's trying to relay to the people, especially in his own sending area, in his own home, or his own sending church. So we're going to learn about communicating the vision. That's one of the biggest questions that missionaries had. It's one of the biggest questions I had. In 2 weeks from now, Wes Bentley is a good friend of mine, and he's going to be talking to us about communicating the vision. And he's like one of the strongest communicators I've ever known. So when he comes and he in a sense, when he speaks and the whole room begins to reverberate with his voice, don't feel like you have to be Wes, because I want to bring in the best so we can set the bar high. But no, everybody's going to be different. You can try to be somebody. Like, you ever heard somebody try to be Chuck Smith? And you're like, come on. It might be cute for like 1 or 2 sentences, but just, Chuck is Chuck. So you're going to be who you are. So communicating the vision is a big deal. Raising support, one of our biggest questions. How do I do it? When do I do it? What's it look like? We're going to have a mission sending pastor come in next week talking to us about raising support and how all that's played out. And then a few weeks later, we're going to review that same question with another missionary that's actually going out and coming back and how they're raising support. So a lot of these questions, we'll have maybe a single topic for a day, but we're going to rehearse or readdress these questions as time goes on. And as you're learning more about God's call in your life, you're going to ask more and more questions. And so there's always room for more dialogue on the same subject. So it's not just 1 week. We can keep bringing it back. We're going to talk about learning a new language. The hardest thing you'll ever do is learn a new language. And the older you are, the harder it will be. If you're in your 30s, it's going to be painful. If you're in your 40s, it's going to be excruciating. If you're in your 50s, it's almost impossible, unless God truly anoints you to do it. Most people that get to a certain age, their minds just stop taking in that much information, and they get stuck. And it's a hard thing. I was with a guy the other day at a men's breakfast. I'm actually going to be with him again tomorrow morning. Everybody in the room is 60 to 70 years old. They're like the grandfather of men's breakfast. And I said to him, is anybody doing any missions? He says, yeah, I just turned 75 and I'm going to the Summer of Linguistics Institute in Texas to learn how to translate the Bible, then I'm going to move to North Africa. Well, and you're how old? I didn't want to discourage him, but wow, it's hard for a 20-year-old, or especially somebody in their 60s and 70s. Learning a new language will be painful, but it's essential. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to bring in a guest speaker because I am not a good language learner. I'm dyslexic, so we're going to bring in other people to really help us through that, because I struggled severely with learning language. Then we're going to talk about surviving and thriving cross-culturally. So we're going to take all of the nuts and bolts that we learned in level 2, culture, and we're going to talk about how does that actually play itself out. Not just the theory, but the practice of it, our emotions in it, and how all of those things work. So knowing is half the battle. With our book, we each week will, as you know, and I believe, did everybody do their homework? Do I need to review that? You guys are okay with how to get onto Populi and read your book and do your homework? All right, great. Your book is going to be, and I don't even know if this 50% of your grade is that. Let me just take a second. I've got a couple classes going on simultaneously, and I want to make sure this is right. Your weekly reading is not 50% of your grade, as my keynote says. It's 30%.
That's still more credit. So.
Yeah, either way, you want to do it. And just a note on the book, you're going to continue to read this book throughout your life. It's not a one-time read. And I gave you a book that was that thick so that we weren't just scratching the surface, we were actually digging a little bit deeper. So 30% of your grade is your weekly reading. It's normally 2 chapters, could be 1 chapter. It's often between 45 and 50 pages per week, and we divided the chapters up hopefully equally on that. We were not able to match the readings with the teaching subjects because there's so much to cover, and the book did such a good job at covering it that we'll review a little bit of the book each week, but our subjects in class will be a little different so that we can cover more in a 15-week time. Even though we're doing 3 hours a week, there's still so much to cover. We're just going to be scratching the surface. And then, of course, we're going to have our midterm paper. That will be 30% of your grade. And then we'll do the final paper, which will be 40% of your grade. And let me just take a look at and see what I have on my presentation. If we're just looking at Populi, you guys are, like we asked already, you're okay with getting on the website and working with that? All right, I love level 3. You guys are absolutely wonderful. Your midterm paper, and I don't know why I've got all of my percentages wrong, but your midterm paper is not 25%, but it's 30% of your grade. In your midterm paper, what you're going to do, and this should be listed in your syllabus in detail. Yes, it is here in your syllabus in detail. You're going to write a 10-page paper, and I believe it's a 10-page minimum, 20-page maximum. I had a guy last semester that wrote me 30 or 40 pages, and I just said, come on, just cap it at 20. So if you like to express yourself in writing, there's a few extra pages in there. I don't want you to get bogged down with just exactly 10 pages, because that's more nerve-wracking. Get it out. Don't go too long, don't go too short. 10 minimum, 20 maximum. In your midterm paper, you are going to be interviewing 2 veteran missionaries that have served a minimum of 3 years cross-culturally. Now, these missionaries have had to have lived in different continents. So you can't get somebody from, let's say, England and another person from France, because that's Europe. If you do find somebody from England, that's fine, but they have had to have lived in that context consecutively. Of course, they can come home for Christmas for a couple weeks, but they've had to have lived in that ministry for at least 3 years. The more years that somebody lives somewhere, the more they're going to know. So if you find somebody that's been somewhere for 10 years, it's better to interview them. So 2 different missionaries that have served at least 3 years, hopefully more, on 2 different continents, and it has to be cross-cultural. It can't be, like England's a bad example because they all speak English, and we don't call England culture shock because we are so Western and our language is from them. We call it culture adjustment. There's adjustment to be made. There's a lot to be learned, but there's not really culture shock. But France would be another language and even another worldview. Even though they're Western, the French are different. The Germans are different, right? People from Holland are different. But I would say stay away from England, Ireland, and Scotland because we're so close to them. Stay away from Canada. Canada's too close to home for us. But if somebody's lived in deep Mexico and they had to learn Spanish and live in a whole different worldview, then that's good. So either Central, South America, Africa, the Middle East, Asia, Eastern Europe especially, 2 different missionaries from 2 different places. You can start, if your church doesn't have missionaries that you can go to, you can call Costa Mesa's missions department. And Felice is the girl that runs the show. She's not the missions pastor, but I'll tell you that she knows everybody. She's got her finger on the heartbeat and the pulse of all of it. Costa Mesa has over 200 missionaries out. And if it's not somebody from Costa Mesa, they'll know somebody that you can call. So if you have to search outside of your church, which most of us do because our churches aren't big enough, there are places you can start at Costa Mesa. And the reason why I'm not giving you a list is because learning is the first thing for a missionary, and nobody's going to hold your hand overseas. Nobody's going to teach you how to do it. You're just going to get dropped in there and say, become a learner. So that's what this first paper is like. This is your midterm. You're going to meet these people, do it through Skype, do it through a phone call, meet with them in a coffee shop. It's much better. And again, I'm not looking for grammar. I'm not looking for sentence structure. I'm looking for 6 questions to be answered, and you can read them there. Let me just read a couple of them. What was the missionary's expectation when they departed from the field? How did that expectation change? Because every missionary will tell you these things. What were those, or were those expectations fulfilled, or did God lead them in a whole different direction, which is very common? What percentage of their time was spent in acclimating, learning language, and building relationships? We want to put like 3 months out there as a new missionary. Sometimes it's 3 years. And so God can throw us a curveball, but it's not a curveball to Him, it's a curveball to us. And we're going to learn that our expectations are normally totally wrong. Maybe 10% of what we expect will actually happen. These interviews will open up our eyes to what's really going on. So let's say, for example, you feel called for, to a certain place. Let's say Central America. Find somebody that came from America and is now living in Central America and interview them. Let's say you're called to Asia. Do the same thing. Last year, most of the students found people from the Middle East and Asia, and their stories were totally unique, but so similar. And it was wonderful reading these midterms from last year. And if you want to read the ones from last year, they were like mini biographies. I kept them all because they were golden to me. People I've never met that the students went out and found. So you go through all those questions and just make sure you answer each question. And when you're writing the midterm, please do a subtitle and say, I'm asking the question, what were your expectations like? Do that in bold. And then I want to hear the dialogue. And like I said, this is better done in a coffee shop. So you can just take notes about what they're saying and write it just that way. It doesn't have to be perfect. I want to hear their heart, and I want to hear your heart, and I want to hear what God's doing in that. So 10 pages maximum. Oh, I put 15 pages, 10 pages minimum, 15 pages maximum, and you know all the style guides.
Can't be 20?
And all that. I hope not. Okay. 15's better. If you have to push 17, do that. But since I put 15, I'm going to hold to that because it's a lot easier to correct 10 or 15 pages at 15 pages each, or 50 papers.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so with the questions, so we'll get like a response from the missionary, but you also want us to kind of give our thoughts behind their response as well?
Yes, as you're going through this, I want you to say, I heard this, and this was the story, and this is what God did in my heart as I was considering that. And so you're learning, and you're also being challenged. And just share with me. Imagine you're in a coffee shop with somebody dialoguing, and then you work through that for a month, and then we meet in a coffee shop, and we're dialoguing. I want your paper to be like that, like a conversation you would have with me in a coffee shop. Pastor, this is what God's doing in my heart. This is what I feel called to do, and this is how it's working out. This is what I heard. This is how I was challenged, and this is what I think it might look like in the future. And then hopefully I'll have enough time to respond to each of your papers with specific things that we've learned with that question or that concept. And this will be a really enriching paper. I'm telling you, you've never had a paper like this. This will change your life. And then, of course, we're going to upload those. Remember, no Word docs, no Pages docs, all PDFs. And every year, for some reason, I get these weird documents, just PDFs. Everybody knows how to do it. If you need help, call the office, call me, call a friend. We can get PDFs out there. And then reviewing the syllabus, the final exam is going to be, what's our percentage on the grade for the final exam? Sorry about that, guys. Just a little bit here. Final exam, 40% of the grade. So this is going to be the big deal. If you miss this, you won't be able to pass the class. Because if you miss 40% of the grade, or even a part of that, you're going to go from an A to a C to not passing the class. So make sure your final paper is there. So the final paper will be due at the close of the course, and you will have a detailed action plan and steps of the things that need to take place in your life to start a biblically based, long-term, cross-cultural ministry. Now, I'm not expecting a perfect plan from somebody that's never done it. What I am expecting is for everybody to think through it, pray about it, and put forth ideas. There is no way that any missionary ever has been able to say before they left the U.S., this is exactly what it's going to look like. What I'm looking for is your diligence and your passion in putting together action steps. If you remember in the reading from this week, a lot of people say, wow, Lord, I want to follow you, but maybe not yet, or maybe this isn't the right time, and we delay. Why? because we don't have any practical action steps in our future of how this is going to look. Now, God is going to change everything. The only certainty in missions is that everything is uncertain. So I know for a fact that whatever you put on this paper, 90% of it won't come to pass the way that you think of it. But if it's a biblically based thing, like I'm going to go to that country, I'm going to learn that language, I'm going to learn that culture, and somehow we're going to start talking about Jesus. If that's a Bible study or a church plan or an underground church at a certain country, those things are true. But how is that going to look? We don't know. But I want you to be able to say, this is what I think it will look like. So as you're doing that, then God will begin to shape you. In the reading this week, the author said, which is a famous quote from a missionary, God can't steer a parked car. I want you, in a sense, to put the keys in the ignition, fill it up with gas, and begin driving. And as you're moving forward, then God will direct you. But if you just sit back and wait, you'll just get one degree after another. I have this theology degree, this theology degree, this theology degree, and I've heard about missions, but they're just dying every day, and I'm not doing anything. So this is an action plan to move us forward. We can talk about this more as it goes along. If you want to write a rough draft and send it to me, I'll review it and send it back to you and say, yeah, this looks good. Let's do more of this. Let's do more of that. Let's just keep working through this. These are things that your sending pastor is going to want to see from you. He might not want, or they might not want, depending upon how your church and missions organization is set up, they might not want it all listed out, but they want to know that you have a plan. And so if you think God's calling you, this is first to get you in tune with the Spirit, and for you to show the people that's sending you that you're serious, and for you to show the people that you're going to that you're also serious. And then God's going to reshape this as you begin to make those steps. So this final action plan will incorporate the things that you've learned in the course. For example, the understanding of God's will, the development of a of a support team, the preparation that you're making to live cross-culturally. And in the website under Populi, there's going to be more details. I just didn't have enough room to put it all on the paper, so we can continue to refer to the website for more details as time goes on. So that's the three things. So your weekly reading, your midterm paper, and your final paper. Your final paper, 40% of your grade, 10 pages minimum, 15 pages maximum, and all of those other same things apply. You guys okay with that? No questions? You're all good with papers?
When is the final due?
The final due, we have it on, did I list it? It's on Populi, and I am so sorry for not having the date right in front of me, but it's normally due, I think, a few days before the school closes, because they want us to have everything on the website and submitted. 14, is that what it says online, December 14th? Yeah, and I think I have to have them submitted to the office like by the 15th or 16th. So we're giving you as much time as possible, because I don't want you to rush this paper. I don't want this to be some kind of a scholastic thing where I'm just going to get a good grade and I'm going to be done with it. This is, in a sense, making a plan for the rest of your life. So I want you to really work through it. So I want to give you as much time as possible. And remember, there's no right or wrong answers in this paper. And just imagine you're sitting with your missions pastor and you're just talking. That's what this is. This is just talking. And if everything you're saying is totally unrealistic, I'll tell you, that was a great paper. I'm really glad you thought that, but it was all totally unrealistic. Let's rethink it. Now, you won't have to rewrite it, but I just want you to process that. Okay, you guys don't feel intimidated by that? Right? My class is going to be the easiest class you've ever taken in a sense of homework, but the hardest class you've ever taken in a sense of your heart. So we're balancing it out. You're not learning Greek, but you're ready to give your lives and go to the ends of the earth. Okay, Nana? Okay, excellent. All right, just the schedule. Just a quick review on the schedule. This is going to change constantly because my guest speakers have new schedules all the time. So this is an ideal schedule. Hopefully we'll cover 95% of it, but it will constantly move around based on our guest speakers. Like last week, we went with counting the cost versus God's call, God's timing, and God's preparation. So I'm going to merge God's call, timing, and preparation, hopefully with what we're going to be doing next week, which will be week number 3, developing a care team and receiving donations, because those things do go together, and then we'll keep bringing all those things up. And then sharing the vision will be another one. That's all confirmed, sent out through our local church or an organization or both. These are other considerations that every missionary needs to go through. That is confirmed, but that teacher is still overseas, and so I believe that she'll be in town. She's wonderful as an organizer, and she runs a missions department, and she's part of a mission sending agency, so she's going to be great for that. She just had a baby, and her good are planting churches in Nepal, and so they're going to be home with us, which will be really fun. Dead to Self and Alive to God, the Necessity of the Holy Spirit is a good friend of mine that has been working with Campus Crusades for a long time. She's just what we would call that good traditional church girl that had never did anything wrong in her whole life, and then God calls her into ministry, and now she's ministering to like witches and prostitutes and madams and all this crazy stuff. And she just walks with God, and God does miracles, and she wrote a book, and so it'd be wonderful. And with all of these subjects, I normally have a book each week. So if you want to dig deeper into what we're talking about, we have a separate book that deals with just that topic. So On Being a Missionary tries to cover the wide range, and then there's unique books for each of those. Learning a new language, that will be torture, and we'll be ready for that. Raising up nationals, that's essential. Without the nationals, the church can't grow to the level that God wants it to be. Handling crisis, we're going to have a really good time talking about personal security. Every country is unique in handling a crisis. So we'll paint with a broad brush on that one, but we'll look at and we'll learn about how each of us are going to be in different situations, and some of us might need to know just basics on personal security, like how not to be pickpocketed, which is just basic security. Others of us will be working in war zones, and we need to learn about how to be taken hostage. And when you're taken hostage, how do you cope with that? And how do you work through that? For example, one of our missionaries that just graduated a year ago, she called me yesterday or 2 days ago and said, I need a new biography to read. And so I gave her one about 2 American missionaries that were taken hostage, and they were in captivity for 2 years. And they tell their whole story. And the day that they were being released by the government came in to attack the hostage takers. The husband was shot and killed, and the wife survived. And they're just working through all of God's will in that. And how does that look? And what's it like? And she read it in 2 days and got back to me and said, that was the best book I ever read. Because all of these things are real. Jesus said there is no guarantee for tomorrow, no matter where you live, here or there. So we're going to talk about that. Handling a crisis, personal security, God's purpose in suffering. The biblical balance between church planting and social justice. This is one that's difficult for the American. We're wealthy. We're used to everything being okay. And what's the balance between I'm living in a refugee camp of 200,000 people that can barely eat and planting a church? Do I just feed? Do I just teach? Do I do both? What did Jesus do? How did Paul do it? What should it look like? Should I not give him any money? Should I give him some money? It's a nagging question working amongst most of the unreached. Most of the unreached nations are very poor because they're unreached. They don't have the love of God in their hearts. Their governments are totally corrupt. The people try to rise above just basic survival, and then something happens in the corruption, and they get pushed back down. So a lot of our missions goes into these places, and so we need to learn how to help them without hurting them, and that's going to be a crucial thing. We'll talk about that a little bit today, and we'll look at a book by the end of today's class. Surviving and thriving cross-culturally, we know about that. Thanksgiving break, we don't have a class that week. Team unity, 90% of all missionaries leave the field, not because of cross-cultural conflict, not because of culture shock, not because of linguistic challenges, because they can't get along with the other missionaries from their same worldview. They might not be Americans, they might be Australians, they might be British, but normally we think, oh, you speak English, I speak English, we're all coming from a Western point of view, we're going to get along great. The enemy gets in and he divides and he conquers. 90% of all missions fails because of team unity. And Jesus said they'll know you're Christians by what? Your love for one another. So if we don't have love, we can't even call ourselves ambassadors. It's a big deal, very big deal. And then godly leadership in our family, in our team, and in our congregation. The greatest challenge for any, let's just say in this sense, like a pastor, a father, is to truly lead his family cross-culturally, because he's falling apart personally, and I can attest to this. The team has tons of need. They're falling apart because they're all cross-cultural. And then the congregation is a whole nother worldview. How does one or a group of people actually do this? Only by the power of the Spirit. If the Lord doesn't anoint us, there's no way we can do this. And so finding the right teachers to help us with this is my most difficult task. finding people that are in America at the moment that have done this and that can articulate it correctly, that one is a challenge for me. So pray for me that I can find the right person. I've got a couple people in mind, but nobody's confirmed yet. But this is a crucial one. I've had other people come in the past and I'm like, you didn't cover it. So I'm just hoping. That's why I put it at the very last, so that the last of the schedule so we can get them. And then returning home. Returning home for some missionaries is something that catches them off guard and they have no idea what they're getting into. Today at about noon, I was at Calvary Downey talking to my friends there. We had a pastor's meeting and then we were doing a Bible college class like this at Downey also next semester. So we were meeting about that and I ran into a pastor and his wife in the hallway and I said, you guys are back from Johannesburg, South Africa? And they said, yeah, we just got back 2 months ago. So quietly I said, how are you doing? Are you okay? Are you shut down? And the husband's like, yeah, I'm full speed ahead. And I'm like, you're gonna hit the wall very soon. He goes, I'm on staff and things are going great and I'm doing this. And I turned to his wife and she's like, Emil, call me. Because we don't expect it. They've been in Johannesburg, I think, for 10 years, running a ministry, Calvary Chapel Johannesburg. It's one of the most dangerous cities in the world. More carjackings in Johannesburg every day, except for Juarez, Mexico, which has just as many and most murders. It's a crazy place. And now they're back in Orange County. It's like the culture shock will just cause them to collapse. And we're not ready for returning home. A lot of people come back home and they don't expect the reentry shock. It takes them to the very limit of their ability to cope and they feel like a failure. They draw back and they're out of church for years. They were truly spiritual heroes. And then they come home and they feel totally out of the race. That's something that can really mess with somebody's psyche. All right, so recommended readings. If you guys have your syllabuses, you'll see them on the syllabuses. Each day when I recommend a book, I'll have an image of it up on the screen and you'll be able to see that. And let me go back there. Each time I do that, you'll see it, but then I wanted to put them in print form so you can see the names and the different authors and the different book titles. So you can always refer back to that. And then at the end of class, if I mention something and I don't spend enough time on it, ask me and we'll just pull it out. We'll check it off here and you guys can see that. These are just the beginning of the books that we're talking about. Because if your life is going to be reshaped, just these books and On Being a Missionary is truly the first part of it. And we know we're diving into, like head first, complete submersion. We're diving into a whole nother world. And to think that we can do it with our own personal experience is truly foolish. It'd be like me saying, I'm going to go, play football but never be trained. I'm going to go jump into war and barely know how to even load my gun. These books and these things are going to help us year after year grow deeper and deeper and deeper. Let me just give you an example. I'm about halfway down under Dwayne Elmer. And if you don't have a syllabus, it's okay. You can look at it later. But under Dwayne Elmer, we have cross-cultural connection, which is the first part of doing cross-cultural work. That's good for a person as they're going and when they're there for, let's say, the first year or so. And then we have cross-cultural servanthood. This is when the culture shock starts to set in and all you want to do is run away. Then you take the next step. It's not just connection, now it's servanthood. Now I want to serve them no matter how I feel. Truly living out what Jesus did. And then the level 3 of this same author is now building relationships for effective ministry. So you can see with Dwayne Elmer, he's got 3 levels of culture. Now below him is Sherwood Lingenfelter, which is one of my favorite authors. Ministering Cross-Culturally is the simplest cross-cultural book ever written, and it's profound. Then there's Leading Cross-Culturally. Then there's Transforming a Culture. Then there's Teaching Cross-Culturally. So you can see these things are happening in phases. Before you go, the first year you're there, the next 2 years you're there, and then after being there for many years, what's that look like in the long term? So that's why I've given you so many books, because not one book is going to cover those things. All right, any questions on that? We're all good? Okay. Let's...
You get extra credit for the books? These books?
You can on some of them. Extra credit, thank you for asking. That's a great question. Book reports on any of the recommended books. Yes, if you read one of these books and you write, did I put it down under the extra credit? I know it's on the website. Did you see it? 10 points, but did I say it was a 1 or 2 page summary? I'm sorry, guys. I had a secretary last semester, and we had all this together.
It just says extra credit 10 points. Read and report.
Yeah, it's a 1 or 2 page, 1 page minimum, 2 page maximum on any of these books uploaded, and you'll get 10%.
Oh, yeah, it does say here, extra credit.
Extra credit. It does say extra credit, but it doesn't say what you have to do. You have to read the book and then give me a report on the book. And on one of these books, really, you're just pouring out your heart, and you won't be able to do it in 1 page because there's so much that goes on in each book. You can do it 2 or 3 or whatever pages. And so if you do miss a class, if you've got an issue, if you read any of these books, they'll change your life. So I'm not a stickler of you got to have just these things done. You got to have something done within the wide range of the options that we have. Thank you for bringing that up, Rick. That was great. All right, and then attendance policy, you guys all know that. I don't handle anything with attendance that's done through the office, and all that stuff's good. So you guys are good there. All right. Post-graduation coaching. This is something that is available to anybody that is a student. That's an art student or a credit student. Everybody needs post-graduation counseling. And what we would do in this situation is we would look at 6 things. We would say, okay, let's look at 6 categories. You've gone through all the levels of culture that we offer at the Bible College. You have some kind of a biblical training yourself personally. So you have your theology, at least a basic theology. You have basic missiology from our class, the study of missions. Then we want to look at where are you going cross-culturally. Is it really difficult or really different from where you were born? Then you might need further cross-cultural training, and that normally would happen in country. So if you're called to live in a Latin country, you need to move to that country and be trained there in that culture. So one of the girls that graduated last semester, her and her husband felt called to Mexico, helping planting churches and also doing construction, those 2 things. So they moved for 1 year to a Mexican-run, of course, 100% Spanish language school run by Mexicans that are helping Americans become missionaries. And so they knew that they couldn't learn all their culture from me. I just introduced them to the idea of being flexible. They went there to learn language and culture every single day. So the further you go from home, the longer these things will take. So we would ask you, where are you going culturally? Let's look at your best way to be trained in that. If you're moving to England, you don't need to be trained in culture or language. When you're there, you'll learn it. And quickly, in a country that I'm sure if you remember when you're there, they'll be very quick to tell you, don't ever do that again. They won't be all gentle and kind like Asians and Africans where they're trying not to offend you. They'll say, don't be a stupid American and never make that mistake again. You'll learn very quickly what you should and shouldn't do. So there's no need for training if you're going to a lot of those places. France will do the same. Germany will definitely tell you when you're wrong. Those are always fun. Fun to be humbled. So that's category 1, culture. Category 2, theology. If you're going to be a medical doctor, a nurse, a school teacher, you just need really good basic theology, probably what you already have in the class. If you're going to go plant a church, you might need some more theology. If you're going to do Bible translation, you're going to need a lot more theology. So depending upon where you go, we'll talk about your theological training and how that will interact with that. And remember, all people are constantly being trained that are being used by God. So it doesn't just happen here and then you do the work. You're prepared here, and then God continues to refine and build up your training as you're living out His call in the overseas context. The next category, so first culture, next theology. The 3rd category is leadership. Post-graduation coaching on leadership. If you are called to lead a large team, your communication skills have to be refined. And that can start right here in the States. Then it can be practiced as you go over. You might need to lead a bunch of short-term teams to figure out how to keep a crazy, independent, I don't know the right term, hard to control Americans in line, and they're fighting with each other, and this person says, I'm called to do this, no, I'm called to do that, well, no, you're an idiot, well, no, you're an idiot, and you're like, wait, hold on here. As a leader, you're more bogged down with your Americans that are normally foolish, they've got more zeal than they have knowledge, then you're able to lead the nationals, but you got to lead your own team first before you can lead the nationals, and some of that leadership happens in your church. Being a part of your church, being a part of short-term teams, being a part of those things. Another category that we're going to cover is going to be religious studies. That would be category 4. If you're called to a Muslim country, you need to understand Islam. basic history of Islam and the difference between Sunni and Shiite, the difference between the North African countries versus the Middle East, the difference between Turkey and Iran. They're completely unique, and they hate each other, and they would rather kill each other than call each other Muslims. To us, 1.6 billion people call themselves Muslims. They're not Muslims to each other. Some are apostates, and some are pure, and some have taken the wrong path. Some follow the wrong prophets. Well, I didn't know any of that until I was living overseas. Well, how can I be called to reach Muslims unless I know the basics about them? So good books, good training. There's a website we can refer you to. It's called the Crescent Project, and I'll give you the URL later. But it's a way that we can online begin to get those kinds of things. You can also meet with people here, because we have those different Muslims living here. We have Egyptians, we have Iranians, which are not called Arabs, as you guys know. They're not Arabs. You guys know what they're called? Somebody from Iran is not an Arab. They are
Iranian?
No, they're called Persian. Never call an Iranian an Arab. They'll be like, don't call me an Iranian. I'm a Persian. Well, okay, you're Persian. So little innuendos. They all live in Anaheim. Just if you don't know, Santa Ana, Anaheim has every Muslim nation represented within a coffee shop or a restaurant or a group, and you just go sit with them. If I'm called to Iran, I need to meet some Iranians. And of course, there's always born again Iranians here. So you can ask them, okay, you were born that way, and then you converted to Christianity. What was that like? And you can learn all of that in a context where you can learn it, go home and pray about it, and then move to those countries and start to understand what it's going to be like. Instead of getting shocked when you move there, you get initiated or made aware of it while you're here. All right, so culture, theology, leadership, religion. The fifth category would be security. If you're called to a war zone, you need to understand personal security. We already kind of briefly went through that. There's a great ministry that I worked with called Crisis Consulting International. I'll give you their website. I'll take you to a training if you feel called to a foreign country with that. We'll go to trainings together. I go to both of their trainings. One of their trainings is for the people that stay in America and have to manage the people that they're sending out to these dangerous areas. So as a missions pastor, I'm trained to handle a hostage negotiation process from this side. Do I pay? Do I not pay? Do I talk to family members about every detail that the hostage takers are telling me on the phone about their loved ones? Do I talk to the government? Do I talk to the media? There's so many things to know. You have to actually set up a crisis management room with crisis management people, and everybody has a role to play, and you've got to do all the stuff that I would have never known about unless they went to these guys' seminar. Now these guys are loving God, they're born again, they're CIA, they're FBI, they're sheriff, they're all kinds of military, and they get together and say, we want to help missionaries get through the things that we were taught in law enforcement and in military, so that you guys that are working in those countries without weapons and without the backing of your government like a military behind you, we want to help you do that through the power of the Spirit. It's a great training. The flip side of that is I'm going to be living in that country. How do I determine if that's a roadside bomb, an IED, and a handmade bomb? How do I determine if that person is surveilling me? Do I know if I'm about to be kidnapped? If I am kidnapped, how do I handle that? For our girls, and I'll just be really honest, what if I'm sexually abused, which is very common. Right now in South Sudan, where I work, women are being targeted every single day. And what they're doing is they're going in and they're raping all of the women that they can find. And and I'll just be really honest with you because this is a missions class, how is it said? I'm trying to say it the right way. They do targeted female genital mutilation every single day. They go in, they kill the men, they rape the women, and then they mutilate the women's genitals. I mean, this is horrible stuff, but it happens. And this is part of what God calls us to do, is to go to places like this. And if you're not personally having that done to you, there's a good chance you're going to minister to a national that had that done to them. What does the Bible say about that? How do we deal with these kinds of things? So when we talk about security, it's not just how do I keep my wallet in my pocket. It's how do I survive in some of the hardest places on the planet, because that's where the gospel is needed the most. What happened when the Romans would come in? They would do all the same things with the early disciples. When Paul was out destroying the church before he was an apostle, he was a terrorist. So Paul's been on both sides of it, and he writes about that in his writings. We can pull those things out. For most Americans, you just read right past it. For missionaries, you say, oh, Lord, that's the answer in the Bible for personal security. Each country is unique. Everything's different for each place. We can find missionaries that are in those countries. So if I can't train you, if nobody in America can train you, the missionary that's living there, they can train you. And so we want to get you prepared for those things. Like we mentioned, Juarez, Mexico has the highest murder rate in the world. It's right over the border from Texas. The highest carjacking and daily murder rate in the world is in Mexico, of all places. And Mexico, just so you know, just surpassed all the other countries for hostage taking. Right now, it's more dangerous to be in Mexico than any other country because the hostage takers are taking people hostage and they're only asking for $200 ransom. So no longer is it, okay, we know your family's wealthy, or we know we can get $10,000 from you because you're American. Now it's, let's just pull anybody off the street and keep them in a like an underground bunker, and if nobody pays, we'll just shoot them and bury them. But if somebody does pay, they'll pay $200. So it's become kind of like a day-to-day thing. It's like selling bread on the streets, taking people hostage. Mexico is one of the most dangerous places to live. So security even goes into what we would think of as the first step country is now much more than just a first step country. It's a lot more intense. All right, finally, language learning. How far are you going? How different is your language? Have you ever tried to learn Mandarin Chinese? Okay, and how'd you do?
It's hard.
How hard was it?
Like scale 1 to 10.
Yeah.
10.
10. And how much Mandarin did you comprehend, and could you hold a conversation in Mandarin?
No.
And how long were you learning it for?
It was just a semester.
Okay. And so did you learn any characters?
No, we just learn the pinyin.
So you learned the American
Yeah.
ABC, we call them Roman text,
Yeah.
for the Chinese words, right? So how many characters do you know are in the actual Mandarin?
Oh, I don't remember.
It's 5,000.
Yeah.
Something like that. It's huge, huge. And they're tonal. You guys know that? Yeah. A lot of Chinese is tonal. And then there's no Chinese language. You have Mandarin and Cantonese as your two main languages, and then you have another, I think, a couple hundred unique tribal languages, and they're completely tonal. For example, you could say the word cow, right? And it could be go, 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 go. Each one of those says something different. One of them is, you're the most attractive man I've ever seen in my life. And the other one is oh, I really like that flower. And the other one is I'm going to kill you if you say that to me again. And you have no idea what you're saying. You just think you're saying cow, like cow in English, cow. And there's all these tones. The language that I worked in Chole, it was tonal. I didn't know it because no one trained me for it. And I tried to talk. They would laugh and laugh. At least some of them were Christians, so they knew I wasn't trying to offend them. Long story short, language is difficult. North Korean, right? Taiwanese, any of these languages that are totally different than what we have, God wants us to learn them so we can become like the people. If we can't speak to them, we can't minister to them. Language is essential. Jesus did not speak heaven, right? He spoke Hebrew because he was with the Hebrews. Very, very unique. So post-graduation coaching. Then we're going to have something wonderful like a cultural dinner. You guys have been to our cultural dinners before. If you graduated level 2, you went to this restaurant. This is our Nepalese or the Himalayan restaurant. Any of you guys go to the Himalayan? It was so good. Rick, did you love it?
Oh, yeah.
It's the best food in the world. So that will be part of your extra credit. I'm sorry for my going back. Yeah, it is 5% of your grade is sitting at a table, eating some of the best food, and just talking about what God's doing in your life with your brothers and sisters in the class. So you're going to love that. Normally it's like $20 a person. It's you plus a guest. So when you come, bring a spouse, bring a friend, bring whoever you want. Cultural dinner. All right, and then we have short-term missions trips. And so if everyone can grab one of these flyers, let's split these in half. Let's pass them down both sides. And this is a ministry called Frontline. Frontline does our short-term trips. And Tony, can you give us a brief on each of these trips that we have here on the side? Do you have a copy of the flyer there? Yeah. Okay. Tony, by the way, is part of the leadership team for Frontline. And that is our short-term opportunities for the school. So go ahead, Tony, give us a basic on what we're looking at for this year.
So we had a pretty busy year thus far. We're kind of slowing down for the end of the year, so it's not as much trips. But for this upcoming September trip in Mexico, we're planning. The Lord has put a vision within our organization to to actually purchase land out there and start a church plant in a Pacific city. And within that city, there's probably no church within, I would say, 30 minutes driving radius. So you know, the Lord put on our hearts is to start plant a church there. So we're actually going to go. We got permission from the city to actually rent out a park, and we're going to have a community outreach, and just to inform people of what we're planning to do, kind of get the community in involved, because our goal is not only just to build a church, but to build ownership with the community. So we're planning to hire everyone within that city to actually help build the church. So this upcoming trip will be more of I would say, a outreach. So we're not going to be doing so much construction or doing, you know, humanitarian things, but just more of a relaxed trip. So
Relationship building.
exactly.
Yeah. Kind of what Jesus did.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
good,
Just
good.
really,
Yeah,
really basic
yeah.
stuff. So nothing labor intensive. Really, it's going to be a really easy trip. And our trips in Mexico are really cheap, at $80. So I don't think you'll find any trip cheaper than that. We do have another trip in September, at the end of September. I have a feeling, based because of Hurricane Irma, we're going to probably be doing a lot of hurricane relief. I'm pretty sure they're going to be hit hard.
It
So
was the biggest hurricane on record.
is it right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they said ever
Ever.
to hit Florida at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So bigger than Katrina,
Yeah.
bigger than all this stuff.
So then, Fred Jordan is a mission organization that's out in downtown LA, and their goal is to reach out to the homeless people. So we're gonna team up with them and kind of help them with running their Thanksgiving outreach. So essentially, it's you have a outreach messages, worship bands, and then you feed them, essentially, and you provide little gifts to them. And then in Thanksgiving, we're gonna have a mission trip out in December. Sorry, in December we're gonna have a mission trip, and it's gonna be very similar to, you know, like Samaritan Purse, how they have a Christmas, you know, gifts in a Christmas box or a shoe box. We're gonna do something very similar out there. We're gonna be hitting up actually like a good amount of places. So we're gonna probably be going to 3 different orphanages, a boys' home. Probably 2 boys' home, a women's shelter, and different cities. So we're gonna have a really long weekend that we can just travel.
Busy.
Busy weekend,
Yeah.
just traveling and doing outreaches at every single location. Just really quick, give the gospel message and kind of give the kids the gifts. Yeah. So and then at the end of December to January, we're gonna go to Puebla in Mexico. That one's near Mexico City. So that one will require us to, you know, fly and get pay for air flights and whatnot, which is why it's more expensive. But still, I mean, $4,000, not bad for a mission trip.
What is that, about a week or a little over a week?
Yeah, about a week, like 10 days or so.
Over the new year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I do know we're planning in the next, I think, week or 2, we're gonna go. A group of us are gonna go to Houston, Texas, to help out there. We're sending a good amount of, or we're sending a large, big rig of supplies and food too. And then I'm planning to go probably sometime in the end of December. So,
And the tickets to Houston right now are only 200 round trip.
wow.
Yeah,
That's
so
really
I was at Calvary Downey today, and we were meeting about that. And I wasn't doing the short term, but they were talking about it in our meeting.
Wow.
And they said they'd get a round trip for $220
Wow.
because everybody just needs to get down there and help those people.
Yeah.
And this is just the beginning, and the next hurricane's going to hit.
Yeah.
And, you know, and the recovery is not going to be in a week or 2.
Yep.
So you could go this month, you can go next month, you can go the month after that, and you've still got things to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in times like this, I love America, the wealthiest country in the world that has homeowners insurance and car insurance, and they have their government and everybody, and the churches still just rush down there and take care of it. So in one sense, I'm jealous because of the unreached. If they were in a storm like that, normally 10,000 of them would die with no insurance. In America, you might get like 10 people that die, and then thousands of churches get on board. But we need to do it, and we saw God do miracles like with Katrina. That was the last time I did one of those. Yeah, and some of our students are already there now,
Wow.
doing that. Yeah, so that's a great thing. You guys good with that? Those are just a couple of the things, and Tony's going to be more in tune with all of the changes. So just go straight to him with that, and you've got see the website there and all this stuff. And so we'll post these flyers all over the campus on the little bulletin board. So those will all be there. All right, and then one other thing is the next announcement is going to be this weekend. It actually starts tomorrow night. Pass those down. Give me the top one that has the highlights. This is called Our Strong Tower. And the man that helps us with Islam training here is George Saeed. You guys might know George. George runs a ministry that's constantly training Americans how to reach Muslims, especially locally. And they're doing a conference this weekend. So it's tomorrow, the 8th, through the 11th. And there will be food provided. There will be evening sessions, and all day Saturday. There'll be some stuff on Sunday, even on Monday, September 11th. Things will be going on, but you do need to register. And if you see, and I have it highlighted on mine in this box, George told me if you're a student at the college, which all of you are, it's free for you. But you'll see the fine print down here. He needs to know right away. And he said, Rob, bring as many people as you can to this thing. Tell your people to jump on the website, to phone call, however he has it on this flyer that's filled with information. I know there's a website you can go right to access this. He just needs to know who's coming and how much food they need to prepare for it. So this is Calvary Chapel, Anaheim, which is just down the street, and it will be an all-day thing. And the keynote speaker, Dr. David Wood. David Wood's a really great guy. He's not just a scholar in the sense of biblical understanding, and not just a passionate guy, but he's the one as the American that witnessed to Nabil Qureshi. And Nabil Qureshi was a Muslim, born and raised, passionate Muslim, became good friends with David, not a debate partner like they were fighting with each other. They were on the debate team arguing with others, and in their friendship, David began to break down Nabil's walls, and finally God just rushed into his life and saved this Muslim. And now Nabil Qureshi's been one of the strongest Muslim apologists in the recent time. He wrote a book called Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, a beautiful book. So that's what these guys are. These guys are feet to their faith. They're not just head knowledge. These guys are really doing it. And George is a great guy. If you've met him, he's one of the most passionate men I know. And David's a great guy. All of these people are good. So if you have a passion for Islam, if you know anybody that has a passion for Islam, this is a great thing to be a part of. And it is timely. Sign up tonight or tomorrow morning. Yes? Oh, did we not have enough of those? Oh, over here. There's more. Just pass those down. And these are timely, so take all of them, because by tomorrow they won't even be. Do you guys need more of them down there? Okay. All right. Let me just give you guys a quick brief on my family. Most of you know me, but of course I have to tell this joke at the beginning of every class. 20 years ago, my wife and I could not have kids. We were part of a church plant here in California. We thought we would live in America forever. God began to stir our hearts for the unreached. We went to India. Our lives would never be the same again. We came back to the States after a short-term trip to India, and where we used to complain about our carpet being from the 70s and my truck being from the 80s, and 60-hour day work weeks. Just that whole, how Americans complain about nothing? We really complained about nothing all the time. Came back from India, and I ran my fingers through that nasty carpet, and I said, Lord, you've given me carpet. I just ministered with people that lived in literally human waste, going down their muddy streets and kids playing in it. It was horrible. Oh, Lord, you gave me carpet. Yeah, my faucet might be broken, but I have running water in my home. That kind of a thing. I might have an old truck, but I've got a truck and I don't share it with 20 other people in my family just to get from here to there and break down half the time. As we started to get stirred, the Lord said to us, I'm going to take you to a foreign land. And we wanted to have kids. My wife couldn't have kids. It's a miscarriage and all this infertility stuff. And we just said, you know what? We're just going to put everything on hold and we're going to move overseas. And we moved overseas, and God miraculously gave us our first child. And so my first daughter was born in America because of complications, but raised in Africa. We took her back at 6 weeks. So she's my African-American daughter. And of course, she's here tonight in the back of class. Can't see her on the camera, but Hannah's with us. So her name in English is Hannah, but in the African group that we lived in, her name is Amio, which means the gift of God. So she's Hannah, the gift of God, Douglas part of the family. And then we were there for many years, 4 years, moved back to America, turned over the ministry to Africans. They're doing great. They've taken it to a whole new level. I could never take it too personally. I work with them every day, so we're still fully connected, but they're running the ministry. Then we moved to Asia, and our other 2 kids were raised there. So I have 1 African American, blonde hair, blue eyed, and 2 Asian Americans. So Lila and Judah are my other 2 kids. We took Judah at 6 months. Lila must have been like 3 years old. So my kids were born and raised in different countries, and people always ask them, do you guys have an accent? Where were you raised? And I'm like, no, they sound totally normal to me, but to everybody else, they have these weird British accents from Indian teachers that trying to speak English. And so long story short, God's given us a great family, a great history, and 20 years of full-time ministry. I do have a website for the ministry. My ministry is called Ends of the Earth. Teaching at the Bible College is my part-time job. This is a volunteer job that I do. My full-time job is Ends of the Earth. We take the gospel to unreached nations. That's what we do, and we do it with all nationals. At the moment, I have 20 full-time staff, doctors, nurses, school teachers, moms, dads, and of course church planting pastors and evangelists, 20 of them now. We have another 20 that are being raised up in a refugee camp, missionary college. So by this time next year, we're going to be at 40 staff members. And so I raise the money for all of them back here in the States, going to churches every Sunday, and then traveling back and forth from America to Africa to work with our nationals. So that's, in a sense, my history, and that's where I'm coming from. My website does have a lot of learning and training on it. The classes that we're in now, the videos will be on the website. You can access them anytime you want. They're free. There's also other videos of other trainers. There's plenty of other websites you can go to learn about the unreached, to learn about security. One of the things would be like the William Carey Library, which is run by the U.S. Center for World Missions. Any book on missions that you've ever wanted, you're going to find it there. Focusing on Buddhism or Hinduism or how to raise my kids in Africa, and every book you could ever want, it's all there, and you can't find it anywhere else. And so my website, we've tried to make it a one-stop place for those that are passionate about missions. All right, let's leave it there. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and start our second half of this class.